Picture this: a young rap prodigy, barely out of his teens, with millions of fans, chart-topping hits, and a lifestyle most could only dream of. But behind the glitz, the jewelry, and the sold-out shows, there's a darker story, one that rarely makes headlines. This is the story of NBA YoungBoy, a talent whose rise to superstardom has been watched, guided, and some would say controlled by one of hip-hop's most notorious moguls, Birdman. For years, Birdman has been known as the kingpin of the rap game, the man who can make or break careers with a single phone call. From Lil Wayne to Drake, he's left his mark on the industry. But when it comes to YoungBoy, the connection goes deeper than just mentorship or business. Rumors swirl about contracts that limit freedom, strategic moves to keep YoungBoy under a specific spotlight, and financial decisions that favor Birdman far more than the artist himself. And the fans? Many have no clue how much influence is really at play. What if I told you that every move YoungBoy makes, every song drop, every collaboration, every social media post has been meticulously guided? What if the very image you idolize, the independence you believe he embodies, is part of a larger plan that's anything but free? In this video, we're peeling back the curtain, revealing the unseen strings that connect Birdman to NBA YoungBoy, and exposing the lengths one of rap's most powerful figures will go to maintain control. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just industry gossip. It's a glimpse into the shadows of power, manipulation, and the cost of fame. By the end of this video, you'll see NBA YoungBoy's rise in a completely different light, and understand why this story is darker than anyone dared imagine. NBA YoungBoy, born Kentrell Gaulden in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was destined for the spotlight. From a young age, his talent was undeniable. He had a raw energy, a storytelling ability, and a charisma that made listeners feel every word he rapped. By the time he was in his mid-teens, YoungBoy had already built a loyal fanbase online. His YouTube videos, mixtapes, and social media presence made him a household name in hip-hop circles long before many mainstream listeners knew his name. But as fast as the fame came, so did the pitfalls of being young, talented, and extremely visible. Enter Birdman Brian "Baby" Williams, co-founder of Cash Money Records, and one of the most influential figures in hip-hop. Birdman's reputation precedes him. The man who discovered Lil Wayne, signed Drake, and molded entire careers into money-making machines. But unlike other industry veterans, Birdman has a distinct approach, one that blends mentorship with an almost surgical level of control. For YoungBoy, that approach wasn't just mentorship. It was a power dynamic that would define the early years of his career. YoungBoy's first encounter with Birdman wasn't glamorous or cinematic. It was business. Sources close to the situation say that YoungBoy was approached at a critical time. He was young, hot on the rise, but vulnerable, both personally and professionally. Birdman saw in him a goldmine, a raw talent who, with guidance, could dominate the rap world. But guidance in Birdman's world comes at a cost. From day one, there were whispers of contracts stacked heavily in Birdman's favor, clauses that limited YoungBoy's creative freedom, and strategic moves that ensured the young rapper's career trajectory remained tightly linked to Birdman's vision. At first, YoungBoy didn't fully grasp what was happening. He was 16, 17, barely out of adolescence, and the allure of working with one of hip-hop's most powerful men was intoxicating. Birdman promised exposure, mentorship, and a roadmap to superstardom. But like many young artists, the fine print, financial obligations, managerial control, and personal influence was buried beneath flashy promises. The public saw a rising star, dropping hit after hit, engaging fans, and building his empire. But behind the scenes, Birdman was carefully orchestrating his moves. Every collaboration, every feature, and even public appearances were analyzed for maximum leverage. Sources say that Birdman didn't just see YoungBoy as a talent to be managed. He saw a blueprint for influence, a way to extend his control deeper into the next generation of hip-hop. And it wasn't just business. Birdman's influence began seeping into YoungBoy's personal life, shaping decisions, friendships, and even relationships. The lines between mentorship and manipulation blurred. For an artist so young and impressionable, This meant that what appeared as freedom on the surface was, in reality, a carefully curated cage. By the time YoungBoy began fully realizing the scope of Birdman's control, it was already embedded into the fabric of his career. Songs were released on Birdman's timeline, social media narratives were subtly steered, and financial decisions were structured to benefit the cash money mogul first. While YoungBoy's talent shone through, the trajectory of his success was being quietly guided from behind the curtain. This wasn't unique to YoungBoy. Birdman has a long history of shaping careers with precision. But what makes YoungBoy's story darker is his youth, the intensity of his rise, and the personal vulnerabilities that made him particularly susceptible to influence. For many fans, YoungBoy's music is raw, unfiltered, and authentic. But the truth is, the authenticity we hear may only be part of the story. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the mechanics of this control, the contracts, the business decisions, and the subtle manipulations that most fans would never suspect. You'll see how Birdman's influence stretches beyond mentorship, and how NBA YoungBoy's rise, while meteoric, came with strings attached that shaped his every move. To truly understand the depth of Birdman's influence over NBA YoungBoy, you have to look beyond the music and the headlines and examine the business side of things. In hip-hop, contracts are often more than legal documents, they're power tools. And Birdman has always been a master craftsman when it comes to wielding that power. For YoungBoy, the contracts he signed early in his career weren't just about money, they were about control. Sources close to the industry have revealed that Birdman's team presented YoungBoy with deals that, on paper, looked standard. There were advances, recording budgets, and promises of promotion. But the fine print told a different story. Clauses ensured that Birdman and his cash money empire would retain substantial ownership of YoungBoy's work, dictate release schedules, and even influence collaborations. Essentially, YoungBoy's talent was being monetized, but the decisions around it weren't entirely his own. It's not uncommon in the industry for young artists to sign deals that favor the label, but in YoungBoy's case, the arrangement seemed almost surgical. Every aspect of his career was strategically mapped out to ensure Birdman remained in the position of authority. Even his public image, what fans see on Instagram, what he says in interviews, and who he associates with, was subtly guided to fit a narrative that benefited the mogul's empire. And it didn't stop at contracts. Birdman's influence extended to the team around YoungBoy. Managers, publicists, and legal advisors were often chosen or approved by Birdman's camp. This meant that YoungBoy was surrounded by people who, consciously or unconsciously, prioritized Birdman's interests. Decisions that might have seemed independent, dropping a song, doing a feature, or scheduling a tour, were often filtered through layers of influence that ensured Birdman's control remained intact. Financially, the grip was even more tangible. While YoungBoy earned millions through streams, tours, and merchandise, a substantial portion of his earnings flowed through Birdman's channels. For an artist so young, navigating the complexities of wealth, taxes, and contracts, having a mentor seems helpful, but in reality, it created dependency. The more YoungBoy leaned on Birdman for guidance, the tighter the mogul's grip became. Some might argue this is just the way the music industry works. Labels protect their investments, executives guide talent. But with YoungBoy, there's a darker undertone. Reports suggest that Birdman's involvement wasn't limited to business. It extended to psychological and emotional influence. YoungBoy has openly discussed struggles with trust, paranoia, and isolation. Issues that, in the context of this dynamic, take on a new dimension. The very man promising him guidance was also, perhaps unintentionally, reinforcing these struggles by controlling his environment. Fans often idolize YoungBoy for his independence, his resilience, and his raw expression. But when you examine the structure of his career, a different story emerges. The freedom fans hear in his lyrics may not always reflect reality. Instead, it could represent the delicate balance he maintains between his own desires and the expectations imposed by someone with far more experience, power, and leverage. By carefully managing the music, the finances, and even the public narrative, Birdman ensured that YoungBoy's rise benefited him in ways that are not always visible. And the most alarming part? Many of these mechanisms are subtle. Fans, media, and even industry insiders might not notice until years later. The control is woven into the very fabric of YoungBoy's career, like invisible threads guiding his every move. In the next section, we'll explore how this influence extended beyond contracts and money, into the personal, the psychological, and even the legal battles that would test YoungBoy's independence. We'll see how Birdman's fingerprints appear not just in the studio or the boardroom, but in the private decisions that shape YoungBoy's life away from the spotlight. So far, we've explored how Birdman established control over NBA YoungBoy through contracts, finances, and industry maneuvering. But the story doesn't stop there. What makes this situation darker, more complex, and frankly alarming, is how this influence bled into YoungBoy's personal and psychological world. For someone so young, in the eye of the public, that type of control can have lasting effects. YoungBoy has never been shy about sharing his struggles. From mental health challenges to legal battles and turbulent relationships, his life has been under constant scrutiny. What fans may not realize is that Birdman's influence often intersected with these personal challenges. Mentorship, in this case, sometimes came disguised as guidance, but it also subtly reinforced dependence. YoungBoy was guided on who to trust, who to avoid, and even how to present himself publicly. Every choice, no matter how personal it seemed, carried the weight of expectation from one of hip-hop's most powerful figures. Sources close to the rapper say that YoungBoy's inner circle, including his managers and advisors, were often chosen or vetted with Birdman's approval. This meant that even the people he relied on for support were, in some way, aligned with Birdman's vision for his career. The effect? A young artist who may have felt isolated, questioning whose advice was genuine and whose was self-serving. In other words, control wasn't just business, it became psychological. Some of the clearest examples of this influence appear in YoungBoy's public interactions. From social media posts to interviews, there's a pattern of timing, messaging, and alignment that aligns closely with what insiders describe as Birdman's strategic oversight. Decisions that appear spontaneous or rebellious, dropping a diss track, engaging with a fan controversy, or responding to another rapper, often occur in a context carefully considered behind the scenes. The image of YoungBoy as a free-spirited, unfiltered artist is partially true, but also partly curated under the watchful eye of someone who benefits from maintaining a particular narrative. Then there's the legal side, which cannot be ignored. YoungBoy's brushes with the law, arrests, probation, and court battles have played a role in shaping his behavior and decisions. Sources claim Birdman's guidance extended to managing these situations, controlling narratives, and even influencing the choice of legal representation. While some may argue this is standard management, the overlap between personal, legal, and professional spheres created a sense of dependency, where YoungBoy's autonomy was compromised. The psychological toll of this type of control is significant. YoungBoy has spoken openly about paranoia, trust issues, and anxiety. When your career, finances, and public image are interlinked with the decisions of someone else, especially someone with as much influence as Birdman, it's almost impossible not to feel the pressure. YoungBoy's highs and lows, his public controversies, and even his creative output can't be fully understood without considering the invisible hand guiding much of his journey. Perhaps the darkest part of all is how subtly this control manifests. Fans hear the music, see the videos, and witness the drama, but the strings are invisible. YoungBoy's loyalty, respect, and trust in Birdman were likely earned through real mentorship and opportunities, but intertwined with those opportunities was a framework of influence that limited his freedom. The combination of youth, fame, and immense talent made him particularly susceptible, creating a dynamic where his rise was as much about external control as it was about raw skill. In the next part, we'll dive into the public controversies and industry conflicts that highlight just how far Birdman's influence stretches. From strategic collaborations to calculated feuds, you'll see that NBA YoungBoy's career moves often reflect a bigger game being played behind the scenes, a game that benefits one of hip-hop's most powerful figures while keeping one of the youngest stars in check. By now, it's clear that Birdman's influence over NBA YoungBoy goes far beyond the studio or business deals. It extends into the public eye, where perception can make or break careers. For YoungBoy, the controversies, feuds, and social media wars that fans witness are often not just spontaneous reactions. They're part of a larger, strategic playbook that benefits Birdman's empire. Take, for example, the timing of song releases. Industry insiders have noted that YoungBoy's drops often align with calculated moments, either to capitalize on viral moments, overshadow competitor releases, or strategically shift attention from legal issues or personal controversies. While it might appear that YoungBoy is acting independently, sources suggest that Birdman and his team often have a hand in orchestrating these moments. The result? A carefully curated image that keeps fans engaged while ensuring YoungBoy's career trajectory remains under Birdman's control. Then there are the feuds, which are a staple in hip-hop. YoungBoy has been involved in multiple public conflicts with other rappers, some of which seem spontaneous but are often timed with precision. By aligning YoungBoy with certain narratives, Birdman ensures that controversy works as a promotional tool rather than a career-damaging risk. Every diss track, every response, and even cryptic social media posts can serve multiple purposes, maintaining YoungBoy's street credibility, driving streams, and keeping him relevant, all while consolidating Birdman's influence behind the scenes. Collaboration choices also reveal subtle manipulation. Features, joint projects, and even who YoungBoy publicly associates with often reflect a bigger strategy. By guiding these relationships, Birdman shapes not only YoungBoy's music but also his network, influence, and alliances. This isn't just about business. It's about controlling the narrative, ensuring that YoungBoy's rise benefits the larger empire while limiting his ability to act completely independently. Social media, the most public aspect of a young artist's life, is no exception. Every post, tweet, or story is a potential move in a larger game. Fans often interpret YoungBoy's posts as raw, unfiltered expression, but those close to the situation claim that Birdman's team often advises on timing, content, and messaging. The intention isn't censorship, it's control under the guise of guidance, ensuring that YoungBoy's personal brand aligns with strategic objectives. And then there are the high-profile appearances and media interactions. Interviews, talk show spots, and public statements often appear spontaneous, but there's usually a layer of preparation that reflects Birdman's oversight. By guiding the narrative in these moments, Birdman ensures that YoungBoy maintains an image that is both marketable and strategically advantageous. It's the kind of control that's almost invisible to the public, but incredibly impactful behind the scenes. One of the most alarming aspects of this influence is how fans rarely see the full picture. YoungBoy is celebrated for his independence, authenticity, and resilience, but the reality is more complicated. His public persona, while genuinely talented and charismatic, is also a carefully managed asset within a broader strategy. Birdman's fingerprints are on the timing, messaging, and even the conflicts that shape YoungBoy's public life, making it difficult for outsiders to discern what is purely YoungBoy's choice versus what is influenced or guided. This strategic orchestration isn't unique to YoungBoy, but the intensity and subtlety of Birdman's approach set it apart. By the time fans react to a feud, stream a new release, or share a viral post, the narrative has often already been shaped. YoungBoy's rise, while undeniably fueled by talent, is also a testament to how carefully crafted influence can steer even the most promising young artists. By this point, it's clear that Birdman's influence over NBA YoungBoy isn't just about contracts, collaborations, or public appearances. It's about control, and control comes at a cost. For YoungBoy, that cost has been measured in personal freedom, creative independence, and the ability to navigate his own path without external pressures shaping every decision. One of the most immediate consequences is the limitation on creative freedom. YoungBoy is widely celebrated for his raw, emotional storytelling, songs that capture his struggles, triumphs, and vulnerabilities. But sources close to the situation claim that even these creative choices are sometimes filtered through Birdman's perspective. From the sound of a track to the collaborators on a project, there are subtle influences guiding YoungBoy's output. This doesn't mean his music lacks authenticity, far from it, but it does mean that the trajectory of his artistry has often been shaped by external pressures rather than pure self-expression. Personal life is another area where the impact is profound. YoungBoy's relationships, friendships, and even family dynamics have reportedly been affected by his connection to Birdman. When one person holds significant influence over your professional and financial life, it inevitably seeps into personal decision-making. Some of YoungBoy's publicized conflicts, legal troubles, and social media feuds can be seen in this light. They are often not just personal struggles, but events that intersect with the larger narrative of career management and control. Financial independence, or the lack thereof, is another consequence. While YoungBoy earns millions, a substantial portion flows through channels influenced or controlled by Birdman's team. This creates a dependency that makes it challenging for a young artist to make fully autonomous decisions. Opportunities that could provide YoungBoy greater independence, business ventures, collaborations outside the established circle, or investments are often filtered or delayed in ways that benefit Birdman's position. The consequence is a delicate balancing act between pursuing personal growth and respecting contractual and strategic obligations. Even fan perception plays a role. YoungBoy's image as a rebellious, independent force is central to his appeal. But that image, in many ways, is curated. Fans celebrate what they see as freedom and authenticity, unaware of the layers of guidance or subtle restriction that underpin his career. Birdman's influence ensures that YoungBoy remains marketable, relevant, and successful, but it also ensures that his growth is carefully managed. For YoungBoy, the price of superstardom is negotiating this tightrope between personal authenticity and strategic oversight. Then there's the psychological toll. Living under the scrutiny of fans, the expectations of an industry mogul, and the pressures of personal life can be overwhelming. YoungBoy has openly discussed struggles with anxiety, stress, and trust. The influence Birdman wields, while sometimes helpful, adds another layer of pressure. Making decisions is rarely simple when every choice can ripple through multiple spheres of control: career, finances, public image, and personal relationships. The consequence is a life in which freedom is often more perceived than real, where independence must coexist with strategic dependency. But perhaps the most significant consequence is the long-term impact on YoungBoy's career trajectory. While he has achieved incredible success, the shadow of influence raises questions about sustainability and creative autonomy. Will YoungBoy eventually carve out full independence? Will his artistry remain guided by his own voice? Or will the structures put in place early in his career continue to shape his decisions? These questions are central to understanding not only YoungBoy's story, but also the broader narrative of young artists navigating the hip-hop industry under the mentorship and control of powerful figures like Birdman. In the next and final section, we'll wrap up the story and connect the dots, showing exactly how this dynamic shapes the narrative of NBA YoungBoy's rise, the unseen forces behind his music, and what it means for fans, artists, and the industry at large. The picture we've painted is complex, but the final piece of the puzzle will reveal just how deep the influence runs, and why this story is darker than most people realize. So, what does all of this mean for NBA YoungBoy, for Birdman, and for the hip-hop world at large? It means that behind every hit, every viral moment, and every headline, there are unseen forces shaping the story. Birdman's influence over YoungBoy isn't just about mentorship. It's about control, strategy, and the power to steer a young artist's life in ways fans may never see. But here's the truth. NBA YoungBoy's talent is undeniable. His voice, his stories, and his music resonate with millions because he's real, raw, and fearless. Even within the constraints of influence, he's managed to connect with fans in a way that few artists ever can. That's the paradox of this story. Immense power guiding him, yet a talent so strong it shines through regardless.